Okay, so let's get started then.
Welcome everybody, welcome. Shkoyach to everybody for coming out and making such a special morning. I want to also welcome Rabbi Lipter, who's we have a very special relationship. We don't get to see each other very often, but when we do, it's very extra special. So I'm very happy you came also, Shkoyach. And we have a very special guest visiting us. Now our connection to Rabbi Yaakov Klein is very, very sweet because we connected online to Rabbi Yaakov Klein, and we started this connection by making a chabura that was learning his sefer called The Story of Our Lives, which is his commentary on Rabbi Nachman's story, The Lost Princess. And first of all, if you've never learned the stories of Rabbi Nachman, the Sipurei Maises of Rabbi Nachman, this is something that is absolutely life-changing to learn these stories. They contain within them a pardes of pshat, all the way to the deepest soidos, to the extent that many of the Mekubalim say that these stories of Rabbi Nachman belong in the Kisvei Kabbalah because of their tremendous depth. And we started to learn this sefer, and Rabbi Yaakov's commentary is unbelievable, so illuminating, so incredible that this story and this chabura that we made lifted us up in a way that nothing else ever had. And we began to forge this connection through that and onward. And we always wanted that Rabbi Yaakov should come here and we should be able to do something. And Baruch Hashem, I know they think it was because of the chasna, but Hashem made it happen that he was, just kidding. Hashem made it happen that through a family chasna, that we're zoiche to be here today with Rabbi Yaakov Klein. So I want to welcome you, and we're very, very, very happy that you're able to make it and to spend the morning with us in Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's an absolute privilege and pleasure and honor to be here. I think we had tried setting up something over Zoom that we should, right? Didn't end up working out. It's much better in person though. It's much, much better in person. And so it's difficult, when Chaver are eating breakfast, to start with the singing, because then pieces of eggs end up all over the place, and coffee and spills and things. So I think I'll share a couple of words just first while the Chaver are finishing up. No pressure to finish, but by that time, hopefully, enough of us will be able to join in the singing. Our dear and precious Rav, Rabbi Avra, mentioned to me that some of the Chevra are learning Torah Nun Vav. Torah Nun Vav, the 56th lesson in Rabbi Nachman's Likutei Maran, which is part of an international network of kollelin, small learning programs of Chevra that are all learning this lesson together. Actually, in London, we have 3 times a week, 10 to 11 o'clock p.m., or at the end of a very long day, a couple of Chevra educators from different organizations get together also to learn this teaching. And so we're mamish up to our neck, Baruch Hashem, and beyond in Torah Nun Vav. For weeks and weeks and weeks, we've been delving really deeply into it. And so for those of us who have the background, you'll appreciate just because you're already familiar with some of the concepts, but assuming that there are many others who are not holding at this time in the teaching. So just to share just a very, very small nakuda from that teaching, and we'll try to develop it, Be'ezus Hashem, a little bit more with time, over the time that we have together with Hashem's help, B'siyata D'Shmaya. So Rabbi Nachman over there is speaking about the idea of Malchus. The concept of Malchus translates as kingship, kingdom, sovereignty, royalty. Many different translations or associative terminology that we can use when we think about the word Malchus or Melech, right? Which of course means king, but everything that's associated with kingship, Malchus, is it's a hard word to pin down. The way that Rabbi Nachman describes Malchus is not just there's a king sitting in a palace somewhere far away, and we are his subjects, a king and a queen. Rabbi Nachman begins with the assertion that each and every Jewish soul is a melech. The name Melachim Heim, already the Mishnah tells us that each and every Jewish person is already a ben melech, is a prince, is a princess. is shayach in some way, is related in a very deep way to the idea of malchus. It's difficult again to use exactly what word. We can use the word power. We liked, in our chabur, we called it influence. Influence is a more delicate term than power. We're not trying to overpower, but to be able to influence. So each and every one of us has our sphere of influence, no matter who you are. No matter whether or not you think on the surface that you might have that sphere of influence, it's true about every single person. There's no person who lives in a vacuum. No such thing. Every person has some kind of value vis-a-vis someone else where that person really matters. Their opinion matters, their position matters, their guidance matters. And you can move from the realm of the less overt, which Rabbi Nachman calls the realm of iskasia, the hidden influence. Rabbi Nachman goes so far as to say that a person on the surface level might seem to have no influence on any person. And the truth is, maybe in a very hidden way, what do we know, spiritually speaking, about that person's soul and its influence on myriads of spiritual worlds? We're not even speaking about that. Just to move on the level of the spectrum from no apparent influence on the surface to moving into a person who's a friend. Okay, they're already able to identify a way in which this person is able to influence someone else. There's a friend, there's mutual trust. The person is meaningful in some context to someone else, which is of course true, Baruch Hashem, about all of us. A parent, a mother, a father, to children. That's a malchus. That's a malchus, right? There's a way in which the parents are guiding the experience of the children in an incredibly profound way. And then you move sort of to more overt settings, a teacher to students, a rav to a kehila. So each and every one of us, within our own unique circumstances, has a malchus. We have some way of showing up in the world. Just like a melech, like a king. Maybe in his private chambers he dresses one way, he acts one way. But when the king shows up in public, there's a levush malchus. Right? There's a garment. There's an energy with which the king is manifesting his kingship, his kinghood. And this is the same thing for all of us. Where you step back and you recognize sometimes we're so much in our own inner world. We're so much stuck within our own minds and our own hearts and our own internal experiences that sometimes we can get lost in that and we forget that there's maybe a larger percentage of the value of the definition of what it means for you or for me as individuals to be alive vis-a-vis as it relates to other people than as it relates to ourselves. Meaning to say that sometimes in our own inner world, it feels like it's choshech, it's night. But maybe to your child, or maybe to your friend, or maybe to your community, or the guy who sits next to you in shul, or whatever it is, that aren't privy to hapuchas, to all the confusion, the tayu and the vayhu that each one of us in 2024 are invariably going through. There's no way that we're not. If we're alive, if we're awake, each one of us is going through so much inside. But to allow the sound outside of us to be louder than the sound inside of us. Meaning to say that's got to be there. And we spend so much time on inner work, and we spend so much time on learning and on davening and on growing in and of our own selves. But sometimes if we turn the volume too much up on that part, we can forget that there's a whole other soundtrack that's playing, which we call Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. We call the way in which there's a way of bringing Hashem into the world in the space, not only between mind and heart, but in the space between one human face and another human face. It's a whole different thing. That in our worst moment, quote unquote, we are so valuable vis-a-vis the person sitting next to us. So valuable. And our compliments and our good words and our chizuk, divorced from whatever's happening inside of us, that's a separate story, and all of us are working and so on and so forth. but not to sell ourselves short in that way. So Rabbi Nachman says that you could have a malchus that's alive, or you could have a malchus that's dead. Because all of us are invariably, again, going to influence. That's part of the human experience. We're going to have a way where we matter. We're going to have a way where we show up. And to other people, our presence in their lives is valuable. But says the Rebbe, the question is whether that experience of influence is plugged into the source of life or whether it's very limited. And the word that Rabbi Nachman uses for limit is slavery. Is the opposite of ben chorin, where a person's malchus is enslaved, meaning to say it's trapped. What does it mean, trapped? In what sense? It's extremely limited, meaning the person is using their experience of being alive, of being human, in a way that's so limited to their own designs, to their own motivation. And we call that not influence of any kind, we call that manipulation, right? For a person to be manipulating other people, chas v'shalom, and using their influence to get what they want, you can't think of anything more limited. Because what one person wants, in relation to their own motivations, in relation to what they think they ought to have in their own life, good morning, thanks for coming, in their own life is so limited, is so limited. He says that's a malchus that's dead. He said that's a malchus it's trapped, chained. It's bound up in the shackles of katnus, of smallness. So what's the opposite of that, of course? If a small malchus, if a small way of interacting with other people is to do so in an ego-oriented way, in a self-oriented way, so obviously the flip side of that is going to be what Rabbi Nachman calls, and he uses this pasuk in this context, ki lahashem hamalucha. Ki lahashem hamalucha. Means that all of us, with whatever spark of influence we have, and we're all tiny little cogs in a gigantic machine that's moving in ways that none of us individually can even begin to grasp. That only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can understand how it is that myriads, millions, and trillions, and I watched the debate, some. Anyway, millions and trillions and billions and all these different billions of human beings, each little spark of the human experience, all of us coming together in our little cluster of family, community, our nation as a whole, in this generation, previous generation, future generations, the impact that all together is somehow the rising sun of the redemption, is something that none of us can understand. We're tiny little cogs. But to recognize that all of us in that position as these tiny little cogs, which on a subjective level, that's our whole universe. So to us, it's not tiny. To us, this is our lives. Mamish, our lives, that's all we have. But tiny little cogs. But the influence that we have, if we recognize that I am in this world, with my little experience of sovereignty, each of us relative to our own setting, like we mentioned, our sphere of influence, not for myself and not for ourselves in any way, shape, or form, but rather it's on loan. This experience of being able to influence, it's on loan. I'm a corpse otherwise. We're corpses, but we're not, in as much as we have a life, we have a neshama. That neshama is not ours. That neshama is on loan. That neshama is a chelek elokah mimal. That neshama is a revelation of the divine. That's the only way that any human being can ever even imagine influencing anybody else. In what way should we influence anybody else? Only because we have inside of us invested a spark of the ultimate influencer. The ultimate, today we use this word influencer. The ultimate influencer. It doesn't need TikTok or anything like this. The ultimate, the influencer with a capital I, Mamish, the first cause, the sibas kol hasibos, the ein sof, whatever these ideas mean, whatever it is. But that which is so infinite that there is nothing beyond it. It's philosophically impossible, and that's the Jewish God. It's philosophically impossible to think of anything bigger. And then we stopped there and we said that, right? That is God. EF Shar. So we carry a spark of that inside of us. Memelo, we carry a spark of that inside of us if we want that our influence should be free in such a way that it's freeing for others, and maybe this is the most key, and this is the greatest indicator, in a way that it's freeing for ourselves, that we feel good about it. We feel good about interactions. We feel good about dynamics and relationships. We feel good in marriages. We feel good, parents and children. We feel good, Rabbanim, and especially like this, and a Kehillah, in a way that you sense, like this is right, is only Kila Hashem HaMelucha. When we utilize our beingness, our Malchus, to further reveal the presence of Hashem in His world. That's it. That's the only way, which comes with humility, which comes with authenticity, which comes with vulnerability, which comes with just openness. Mamish of clear channel, where everyone gets the sense we're in it together, right? Each of us in our own way, joining together to bring about something much greater than the sum of each one of us in whatever individual relationship. Something bigger. I think maybe this is what Chazal mean when they say ish v'isha zacha, that if you have a husband and a wife, that zacha, the word can mean that merit, right? Like a zechus. But of course the word also, like in the context of Shem and Zay, is zach. The word zach can also mean refined, pure. So the way that I like to read this Chazal is ish v'isha zacha. If there's a clear channel between them, zacha, if they're refined, then shchina shriya beinehem. Then in their partnership, where each one influences the other, as a husband and wife should, it's a partnership. Ezer kenegdai, right? It's an ezer. It's a mamish a partnership. So if it's zacha, then shchina shriya b'neihem. They recognize that their whole task in this marriage, their whole task in this binyan bias, that their whole task in the great adventure of eventually Be'ez Hashem parenthood, and each one of them living their lives individually, but then bringing it home at the end of the day, living it together, is shchina shriya b'neihem. Is just for Hashem, just to increase God consciousness. And that's what Rabbi Nachman calls in that teaching to those who are learning it, but to all of us, what's called bringing arichas yamim into the malchus. It means that our malchus should be mamish alive, vibrating with purpose, meaning, something so much bigger than our own little wants and needs, that leave us feeling trapped and chained, that leave us feeling small and not expansive in ways that we can't even imagine anything more expansive than this tiny little cog that's part and recognizes its part in a machine the likes of which all of history depend on. That everything that ever happened depends on. So just wanted to begin by sharing that. Now let's sing. If you're not finished your bagel, I don't know how many bagels you've been, there are a few bagels left, but hopefully by now everybody's finished. So let's sing together, Be'ezras Hashem, and I want to read to you Be'ikar, a little bit further along, two small teachings from the Piasetzner Rebbe I would like to learn with you, just on the same theme. But let's begin by singing a bit to Hashem's song. Join me to the shade. Song just popped into my head. I don't know how many of the Chaver know it. If you know it, please join. Like I like to say, if you don't know it, please don't join. And wait until you hear it a few times. And then for sure join. Okay, so it goes like this. Maybe a little bit higher here. batchu avoy seinu batchu vatvalteimo ay 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 lecha zaku vinimatu chaba uvela yebaishu ay 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 lecha zaku vinimatu chaba uvela yebaishu. Here's the easier part. Ay 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 lecha zaku vinimla tu bechabat uvilay ba'yishu da 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 la 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 di da 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 la ay la la ya la 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 ya la 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 mo no no ya na let's turn on a bit of a higher key. Hi, la, 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 la. Hi, la, 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 la. Bam, 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 la, 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 la. La, la, hi, la, 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 la. Ah, la, 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 la. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. It's good to dance. It's good to dance. It's good to dance. We can still dance, you know? We can still dance. Not the easiest times we're living in. Not easy. Not easy, not easy, not easy. Mamish, not easy. Maybe the most challenging aspect of the time that we're living in is the fact that we used to have the privilege of having our hashkafos, having our doctrines, having our perspectives clarified because of adversity. So when they came at us on the outside, we just became so much clearer on the inside as to who we are, what we stand for, what Yiddishkeit is, what it means to be a torch bearer of that flame of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And it seems that in order to fulfill the prophetic vision that Chazal, our sages, taught us, as recorded at the end of the Gemara of Saita and other places, this idea where the universal cry of the generation before the coming of Mashiach being Ein lanu al mi lehisha'en ela al avinu shabashamayim is true ultimately, meaning it's true absolutely, not just from the outside, but maybe from the inside also. Where there's so great a confusion as to what we ought to do. Yes, Israel, no Israel, you know. Yes, army, no army. You know, I saw online people with just as much fervor. We must donate to the Karen that they're setting up, and other people like, you cannot donate to that Karen. And these are all from Dear Yidden. It's not secular versus the confusion. The confusion. If there was ever a time we needed a Navi, you know, to say something absolute, not a svara, but to say something clear, we don't have. We don't have. There were always differences in opinion throughout history. But this acute, this gulf, and I would say these gulfs, because there's so many different differences and so many. Who are we, you know, as individuals? Where do we align ourselves? With which community, you know? Which hashkafa? Which approach? Not easy all the time. It's not. Sometimes it's easier if we can just say, you know, this l'chol hadeh, you know, if you're part of this chasidus, you're part of that yeshiva, or you're part of this, and you're able or willing to do that. I don't know if it's like a conscious or subconscious thing. So no, in a way, that's it, you know. And then that's the whole thing. You just sort of put your eggs in that basket. But increasingly in this complex world where people are really starting to be filled with that spirit of malchus, which is individualism, you know, where people have access to a whole bunch of perspectives, you know, that previous generations didn't, access to information maybe that previous generations didn't. The general zeitgeist is very different in the sense of each person being the master of their own destiny in a way that it didn't used to be. Authority, you know, society was much more authority-based. It's confusing. I'm just speaking for myself. I don't know if this resonates with anybody. I'm just literally speaking for myself. I oftentimes am very confused as to which direction to take my next step in this generation. And it has a chisaron that I mentioned before, which is a certain lack of clarity. And it has a maila because I'm not a person who lives with biases. At least I try not to. I'm really trying to be mevakesh emes to the best of my capacity. And the maila of that is that I can look at both options and say, like, I hear both sides. But it doesn't help me, because if both sides are valid, then I still don't know which side to quote unquote support or align myself with. And this is not just true on one particular issue that I mentioned. It's true maybe across the board. We live in a state of bilbul hadas. And the only thing that gives me nechama, and the only thing that gives me comfort, that I keep on remembering, and I keep on reminding myself, and I like to remind all of us now, is that it's impossible to take a look at what's going on now in the world at large and within Klal Yisrael befrat, and to say, hey, this doesn't match up with the vision of Chazal about what's going to happen right before the coming of Mashiach. It's impossible to look at what's taking place and say, it's bad, but it's different than that. It isn't different than that. It is across the board, precisely as Chazal foretold. This is how it's going to be. V'ha'emes tehei ne'ederes. The truth will be wandering. Adarim, say Chazal. Adarim. The truth will be divided. Everyone will have a bit of truth. No one will have the whole truth. And it'll take people who are very, very big in their vision and in their courage to be able to be truth collectors, to go around collecting a little bit truth from here, a little bit truth from there. Not really aligning ourselves too much with any man-made construct. Ein lanu al mile sha'ein ela al avinu shabashamai. That's all I'm committed to, nothing else. Nothing else. No one else. Nothing else. HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvayde v'atzmai. And that's the state that we're in. And so on the one hand, you want to give up, right? Because on the one hand, it's fafal, like it's over. On the surface of things, like, when else in any of our lifetimes has the world been in such a state of upheaval, and more specifically, has the Jewish nation, with everything that we've come to become so accustomed to over the last 70 years? We got the state, and there's this general vision, if you're not mamish satmar, but there's this general vision that we're coming home, and that this is where things are at. And to see the thing implode, I'm not even talking about what's going on outside, I'm talking about internally. The EF Shar, ma'iyeh, to be in such a state where there's no state to be, there's no, you know what I'm saying? You're not in a state, there's no state. There's a state of statelessness, there's a state of shock, of bewilderment. So on the one hand, you want to give up. And on the other hand, you remember that every darkness is the opportunity to light a spark, if you can, or to discover the sparks that are there that are that much more meaningful, specifically because of the dark. And I think the greatest spark among them, kiviyachal, is this aspect of now, ein lanu al mile sha'ein. We've been pushed to such a place where there's no other option but to rely on Hashem alone. Hashem alone. And we, as Orthodox from Yidden, have sometimes along the journey fallen into things that aren't mamish Hashem alone. We've fallen into to sectarianism. We've fallen into externality. We've fallen into even good shades, meaning necessary elements of an organized quote unquote religion that needs to maintain itself throughout history, which it's done. But that when it comes in the light of Mashiach, zelo, when we're standing in mamish in the sunlight of the Geula, so those need to fall away also. Even the good things, it needs to be. We have nothing else but mima'amakim karasicha Hashem. We don't have anything to rely on. Klum. We have nothing to rely on. Not the Middle East, not the West, not this, establishment or that establishment. Klum. Ella alavinu shabashamayim. And that's an opportunity that we've been gifted, even though it's so difficult. It's so difficult to accept it. because we've been wired as individuals and as humans to always be thinking, okay, but if that doesn't work out, I still have that. Like we still have, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you've been feeling this way. Like if Canada, you know, just, I don't know Canada, but let's say, I don't know if does anybody hate Canada? I don't know. Canada's just like, it's sort of, like the whole world will blow up and Canada will just be playing hockey like it always did. Like, you know, whatever. But let's say, so this is a pretty safe place. But London, I'm talking for real. Yeah. I walk on the streets and it's scary. But you think to yourself, okay, if this mamish tanks, so the backup plan. Like, there is no backup plan. There is no backup plan. There's just him. There's nothing else. And on the one hand, it's terribly scary. On the other hand, what a gift. This is what it means to be a Jew. This is what it means, Yitzchak going to that Kedah. There is no backup plan. And then from the place of no backup plan, nope. A Malach comes, Avram, and everything changes. But we have to be pushed until the place where we are ready, willing, and able to say, I don't have anything else, but I have the everything else. I have him, and he has me, and I don't understand it, and it's scary, and it's unsettling, and it's confusing. And what's going to be? But this is called the emunascha b'leilos. This is called May ayin yavei ezri, from a place of ayin, from a place where I don't know anymore. Remember Rabbi Nachman in Sicha Saran, Sicha Gimel, Tachlis Hayediyah, the pinnacle of knowledge, Asher loy neda, is to come to a place where you just say, I don't even know anymore. I just don't know. But the one thing I do know is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. V'yahavta eis Hashem alikecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafsha b'chol ma'adecha. This is just back to basics, when everything else falls away. There is nothing else. There's just HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo v'atzmai, and His Torah, and 613 mitzvahs, and ben adam l'makar, and ben adam l'chaver, ben adam l'atzmai. That's it. That is it. To be the little cog that we mentioned before, in as conscious and as authentic and as clear channeled a way. That's all there is. And that's the pasuk in Tehillim that I like to say, maybe one of the most powerful psukim, especially seen through the lens of Chazal, where David HaMelech tells HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tashev enosh adaka v'toimer shuvu b'nei adam. How does the verse translate? Tashev enosh adaka means, Tashev, you've really returned, you've pushed man, Enosh, the human being, ad daka. Daka means poverty, impoverishment, lowliness. And the end of the pasuk is V'taymer shuva b'nei adam. And then you said, return, son of man, return to me. Say Chazal, what does daka mean? What does it mean? Hashem pushes us into daka. Say Chazal, it's like maybe one of the earliest forms of the concept of mental health, you know, where you see Chazal Mamish speaking about the inner world of a person. You ready for this? 3 words. Ad, meaning Hashem pushes us ad until dichducha shel nefesh. Dichducha shel nefesh. Because that's not how I would translate. I would think it's talking about money, you know, to be pushed into a state of poverty. No, it says dichducha shel nefesh, an inner lowliness, an inner feeling of being stamped down, of feeling confused, bewildered, lost, lonely, adichducha shal nefesh, which is precisely the state that so much of us are experiencing. Dichducha shal nefesh. And then, say Chazal, from there, and from there specifically, Latoimer, Hashem says, good, once you're in that place, shuvu b'nei adam. Now you can return to me for real, but for real. Only then, you know, what they'll call in the world rock bottom, whatever it is, when a person mamish feels that life as they knew it is falling apart, because as they knew it meant that it was under their own control, and then they see that their own control didn't work out very well, not for them and not for the people around them. When it becomes apparent and clear, so then we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was only ever in your control. I'm giving back to you what was already yours. It hit me so clearly last week. I was speaking to somebody, and we know this peripherally. It's part of our emunah. Of course, we know Hashem is in control. But I mean, on a very pragmatic level, like even if a person didn't believe at all in anything, and they mamish, just consider what percentage of your life and my life and each of our own lives what percentage is really in our control? If you think about the what we call the klalius, the generality of life, from our family that we were born into, from the schools that we were sent to, and the experiences in those schools and the teachers that we had, and all of the experiences within that realm. And then not even the school that we went to, but the specific kids who were in our particular class that just so happened to be born, those souls and those bodies at around that same time and in that same demographic whose parents also saw fit to send to that particular school. What kind of impact can you imagine that the classroom dynamic with those particular kids has on molding the perspectives, the self-perspectives, the experiences of a child growing up, which become some of the most formative experiences on an internal level to one's whole life? That's just, let's say, elementary school. Or I don't know what they call primary school here. Elementary? Okay, elementary school. In London, they call it primary school. Okay, I know it's a British province, whatever. I see British, they have London, Canada, and all these other places. Warwick, I saw. York, exactly. So think about that. That's just elementary school. And then you talk about experiences in high school. Varied experiences. Things that happen to us that aren't chosen, that aren't controlled, that aren't navigated, they just happen. You talk about marriage. Anybody who's married understands, it's if it weren't with the most incredible degrees of siyata d'shmaya, I don't just mean this from men to women, I mean to women to men, no one would ever get married. If you think about it, it's a wild decision for a 20-something-year-old to make. I mean, this is the rest of your actual life. And what? Because you saw her 7 times, you didn't see her parents, you didn't see her siblings, you didn't see family dynamics, you didn't see, Baruch Hashem, I'm blessed. I don't want to make it sound like Baruch Hashem. I'm just saying ostensibly. I don't know, maybe someone experienced this somewhere. But it is theoretically possible that a person would put themselves in a position where there are myriad details that they could never have even imagined in terms of the strength and power of their impact on their life, their circumstance, where they're going to end up living, and what kind of community that's going to be, and so on and so forth. So percentage-wise, I don't know if it's 80-20, I don't know if it's 70-30, an overwhelming percentage. And I'm talking on a very pragmatic, practical level of our lives that we pride ourselves with that's our free choice and our autonomy and our individuality, has nothing to do with us. Think about that for a second. It's shocking. It's shocking. So much of our own lives clearly is out of our control. Clearly. And then within the tiny little 15, 10%, 20%, whatever it is of our lives, we're so adamant on controlling that it's crazy. It's crazy. We're starting on a platform of 70% of our lives being bichlal, not even having a havamin of it ever having been in our control. And within this tiny little thing, it's like, if it doesn't go my way, everything falls apart. I don't understand you. And I don't understand you, I mean me. I don't understand myself sometimes, mamish. And this is a thing we all fall into. It's insanity. So of course we choose when we make the right choices. But this sensation that we're in control is a sheker, is a dimion, it's a delusion. And life, paradoxically, ends up going much smoother when we let go. I know it's like a cliche, let go and let God, but they became cliches because they're very, very true. Life ends up going more smoothly when we quote unquote jump, and we think we're gonna fall, and magically that's when you grow wings. It's Avram Avinu taking Yitzchak to that Kedah. It's what the Heilige Pri Tzaddik, the Heilige Tzaddik writes in Sikhs Tzaddik, that the whole foundation of the Jewish nation is, and he uses this lashon, this very beautiful terminology, 2 words, la'achar yush. He says the foundation of our nation is after despair, because Avram and Sarah could not have children. They could not have children. The whole Jewish nation, Yitzchak, Yaakov, 12 Shvatim, 70 members, turned into 3 million at Har Sinai, 600,000 root souls of the Jewish nation, and so on throughout history. It wasn't possible because our earliest ancestor could not bring children into the world, Avram and Sarah. Avram loy moilid. Sarai loy... Whatever the feminine terminology of that is. Couldn't bring children into the world. Says Reb Tzaddik, you know why? Because this miraculous people is going to need to be rooted in its spiritual source in a place that's already after we've fallen into hopelessness. That's when the Jewish spark shines. So that means all the while we think there's still something to rely on, Mashiach can't come. Shocking thing. Because the Jewish spirit cannot manifest itself in all of its glory until it's la'achar yish. And that's what Rabbi Nachman came to bring to the world. Ein shum yish ba'olam klal. What does that mean? Rabbi Nachman doesn't mean that there is never a circumstance where a person doesn't feel like they want to give up hope. There are hopeless circumstances. That's true. That's a fact. But Rabbi Nachman says in the ultimate sense of the word, in the ultimate sense, ein shum yish. Because that's what it means to be a Jew. Is to experience a set of circumstances that will make it clear to you that on an earthly level, ein sikui, there's no chance, there's no hope. And from that place, smichas keren l'david avdecha, after the seed of the Mashiach has been rotten deep under the ground like a seed, rots away, says Rabbi Nachman, that's when the roots begin to spread. That's when the shoot begins to push through the earth, to burst through the surface, and to spread its wings into the sunlight. That's called emunah, ve'emunascha ba'leilos. And that's what Rabbi Nachman said as an introduction to the story of the seven beggars, the last story in Sipurei Maisius, the story of Mashiach, the story of paradox, the story of the way in which it's specifically the cripples who maybe are the most capable, the story of which it's specifically a generation of cripples who somehow has this incredible power of fortitude, this power to dance, this power to sing, this power not to give up even after all reasons to give up have revealed themselves. Rabbi Nachman begins the story and it only appears in some editions of Sipurei Maisius, not all of them, because it's so radical. Take a look, you'll see. But in some editions it says, Rabbi Nachman says, I will now tell you, well, this is how it's printed in most of the editions. It says, I'll now tell you how they used to be happy. That's the general nusach. I'm just curious to see if, whatever, not to make yourself crazy, but there's Sipurei Maisius, you'll check afterwards. It says Rabbi Nachman, now I will tell you how they were happy. Mitoy chamar shchayra. From in the depression, from in the sadness. And the story starts, you remember the wedding? Where they make the wedding? In a pit. And they covered it over with garbage and straw. And that's where the wedding was. In the dark, in the dump. Rabbi Nachman says, I'm going to tell you a story about how to be happy in the dark, in the Yush. Which means to say, in other words, I'm now going to tell you how to be a Jew. How to be a Jew. How to be a Yehudi. A Yehudi isn't a person who has things to depend on, and that's how we know it's going to work out, because there are things to rely on. A Yehudi is a person who says, I don't know that the next step I take, there's still going to be ground under my feet. But march on, I must. March on, I must. With simcha. With simcha, with bitachon, with amunah. Without the clarity that everything's going to work out my way. But clarity that he knows what he is doing. And that's it. And that is the whole thing. And we don't have to have clarity. We don't have to have clarity. All the while that we still have some strategy, I don't know. I just don't. You come to a place where you say, I don't have to have an opinion on everything. I just don't. And it's like this crazy thing. People feel like they have to take a stand. I don't know. I just don't know. I'm not a Navi. I don't know. But the fundamentals we do know. And that's what we rely on. That's what we rely on in a time of terrible darkness. Threat from without and confusion from within. Go straight up. I like to say, people, don't lean to the right, don't lean to the left. You lean up. You don't have to you don't have to go to the right or to the left. Up, out. Just be above the whole conversation. I go beyond, up. So just to end, and then we'll sing one last nigga. I know we're running late.
You're the one who has a flight to get to. It's okay.
Oh, that's true. But I just want to read you a little bit from the Pia Setzner, and this will I wanted to read you two pieces. I'll just say this one last thing. So I think we said more than enough, and then we'll sing a bit. So I'm just going to read you a few lines of his holy writings. The Pia Setzner Rebbe was Rav Klein Kalman Shapira of Pia Setzner, who's known as the Eish Kodesh. He was like the Rav of the Warsaw Ghetto, and he was the beacon. You speak about how to be joyous in the darkness. This was the Eish Kodesh. Heartbreaking. His sermons with such emunah. He was a person who was in Yush, and he was sharing the light of La'achar Yush. Mamish. So he has at the end of one of his Sfarim called Achshar Farbrengen, he has a section called Sav Viziras. Sav Viziras. And it's basically like a collection of personal private writings that he wrote to himself. It's like a diary. There's a lot of teachings there that are for others to learn as well. But there are many, many very personal, very intimate writings that are unique in the corpus of Hasidic writings, of Jewish writings. So I just want to read you one entry. It's two short paragraphs, and it's entry 25, Ois Chaf Hei. And I hope that you'll open your heart to it, and I hope that I'll also try to let these words in. Says the Eish Kodesh, Chus Yagan Aleinu, Hashem Yikam Damai. Al tivchu l'meimis atzmei belvad. Says the Pia Setzner, he writes this in the early years of the war, where because of the hopelessness, people were ma'abed atzmam ladas. People were leaving the world on their own accord. Says the Pia Setzner, don't only cry over those who are killing themselves. Bechu bacho, says the Pia Setzner, cry gam as well lahoylech v'meis. To the person who's still alive, but the way that they're alive, they're dead. So not just to the people that are actually going ahead and leaving the world, but to the people who are still with us, but there's something inside of them that already died. And he continues, he says to the community, the whole community is bemoaning and crying and mourning all of these situations and cases of people who are committing suicide. That Hashem Yishmar, that's what was happening. People were losing their businesses, people were losing their families. People were living in a circumstance that B'ez Hashem we shouldn't know anything, a percentage point of what they were going through. Says the Pia Setzner, but that's everybody else. Va'ani mosef l'da'og, I am also crying, gam ala chai ha'holech, also on the walking dead. Lo hemis esatzmei, this person has not killed himself. Umikol maka mesu, but at the same time, there's something in that person that's already gone. Hachayim nasu zol vehefker etzlo. Life has become cheap, and because it's become cheap, it's become hefker, which means it's just a what's the good word for hefker? Free for all, huh? Free for all. Yeah, it's a free for all. Lichyos oy loy lichyos achas hilai. So meaningless is life that it's of no consequence whether to die or to keep on living, because like memanavshach, like who cares? To live or not to live, it's all achas hilai, it's the same. Initially, the Yetzer Hara had to work very hard to get a person to lose faith that there's a dayan, that there's a judge, that there's din in this world, that there's accountability, that things matter, that the choices we make and the tiny percentage point of the things that taka are in our control, which is what the whole Yiddishkeit is, and the bechira that we make, like I mentioned before, that matters. That matters to ourselves, that matters to others, like we said in the very beginning. In our malchus, that matters. Until to get a person to mamish deny that and to rebel, b'shad nefesh, to rebel against Hashem. And he says it wasn't easy for the Yetzer Hara to get a person to think in that way, to live in that way. Va'ata, says the Piasetzno, look around. His bainanti, I contemplated v're'isi, and I witnessed anoshim she'enam koifrim, people who aren't in that state. They're not rejecting the concept of God. They're not rejecting the concept of meaning, purpose in life. They're not rejecting the magnitude of what it means to be part of the Jewish nation, what it means to be B'nai Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, what it means to be people that are marching toward Mashiach. That they didn't reject. But v'holchem mishriras libam. But the way that they don't believe, not in Hashem, but the way that they don't believe in their own import, in their own value, so they go b'shriras libam. Why? Says the Piasetzner, and this is maybe the most relevant teaching that we can learn and teach today in our generation. This is what we see that's happening. They have no sense of self. Not in a haughty way, not in an arrogant way. Just in a minimally, valuing ourselves, appreciating our preciousness. Our children don't have this. Something's wrong. The adults, we don't feel this way. That we can mamish change the world, irrespective of who we are and what our perceived talents or lack of talents seem to be, or the circumstances that we maybe suffered or maybe enjoyed, whatever it is. There's a battle like the Mesilas Yesharim tells us on either side, whether a person's wealthy, whether a person's poor. Everyone has their shlichus. Every single person has their mission. Every person has their bechira. Like I said before, in that tiny percentage point where we're in quote-unquote control, we have the choice. And the choice is not between good or evil. The choice is between creation or creator. That's the whole choice. It's never a choice between good or evil. It's a choice between ego or Hashem. That's the whole choice. But that ability to choose, the way that all of history is mamish weighing on our shoulders, like we matter. Who is Alvahufkar Etzlam? And therefore, Yamos, Yichya, should a person die? Should a person live? Gan Eden, Gehenim, Lumi. Right? So who? Who does that matter to? Gehenim, Gan Eden. And he doesn't mean in the next world. The Hasidic Rebbe's never spoke about paradise or hell in the next world. We're speaking about paradise or hell in this world. Got about the next world. To mamish live in a place of hell or to live in what could be paradise. Lemi. Right? It all is related to that person's own sense of identity. But to most people, it's gone. And they don't have enough care or concern or compassion for their own selves. And here he ends with the pasuk of Beshalach, which we've learned in the context of the story of our lives. Asher karcha baderech. Amalek, that they've cooled us off baderech, along the journey. What does it mean to be cooled off along the journey? Baderech siparti ma'aseh, to those who learned the story, the story of the lost princess. On the journey, baderech. What does it mean? It means that we fall into the illusion that there is no further reason to journey onward because there is nowhere to journey to. That's what it means. Asher karcha baderech. Why would somebody become cold, frozen along a journey? Because we give up. That's what it means. Yish. That's exactly what Amalek is. Amalek wants to make us fall into ultimate despair. Ultimate despair. Asher karcha baderech. Kriras bakol afbat smusai. Says the tzaddik, kriras bakol. We become so cold and frozen in our own inner world because we look around at the hopelessness of it all. And we look around at the seeming pointlessness of it all. What's the point? How much can I do? What can I accomplish? Can't change everything, so what's the point? And we forget. We forget, number one, going back to the beginning, how valuable we are to others. We forget. We don't realize. We just don't realize. And the reason is because we're so busy exporting our inner worth to other people, because we are so reliant on other people's opinion of us and other people and like what other people say really matters to us, that we don't realize that to them, that's what we represent to them. We don't realize this. And it turns out that nobody's actually thinking of about you, because they're thinking about what you think about them. So, and that's really how it works. We're so busy all the time. What does this one think about? Nobody's thinking about you. So like, no, everyone's thinking about what you think about them. And this is the way it goes. I'm telling you, we live in a bit of insanity, but it is true. It is true. Everyone. So you matter to people. So you matter to people. A compliment, a kind word, chizuk, someone's strength. You never know what someone's going through. Rabbi Nachman says in Sichas Ran, you smile at a person, you could save their life. He says you could save a person's life by smiling at them, because you never ever know. You never know. So how much value we have vis-a-vis one other person, and that's just an understatement. How many people? And then every little choice we are able to make. What's the choice? Not to hold on to control. The choice to relinquish control. The choice to take the next step, even though it doesn't seem to be a next step. To say, Hashem, it's in your hands. I don't know. To lean into that and to find comfort there. I don't need to know. I don't know. Ani lo yodea klum. Ein lanu al mi lishain ela al avinu shebashamayim. Then and only then, in an experience of tashev enesh adaka, of being pushed into such a darkness of ein lanu al mi, we have nothing else to rely on. Only then, la'achar yush, after the akeda, after afilu cherb chad benachas al tzavar shel adam, there's a mamish, a knife of Avram Avinu on our throat, because this is what it means to be a ben Avram, is to go up on the akeda. Only then and there we hear Avram, Avram, Hineni. And then we say, okay, now we're ready to serve Hashem. Now we're ready to be warriors. Now we're ready to recognize that little spark that we have inside of us of influence is the Chelek Elokami Ma'al that's in us, asking us to reveal it in all of our ways. Hashem should bless us that our Malchus should be free, not trapped and small. Our Malchus should be Gadol, Mamish, big and alive, not dead. Mamish, the opposite of what the Piasetzman says. We shouldn't be the walking dead. We should be mamish, alive in every sense of the word. We should mamish be people who are alive, filled with a spirit of hope, filled with a spirit of vision, filled with a spirit of realizing that no matter how bad things get, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. This ship has a captain, and it's hurtling home. It's hurtling home. We should only hear Basuras Taivas Be'ezus Hashem. Let's sing one last good niggin, and then we'll finish. I don't know what happened to my pick, but anyway, okay, here we go. Let's do one slow, and then we'll end with some dancing.
Shalom.
much for having me. It's supposed to be here.
Shkoyach to everybody for coming.
Thank you so much.
And shkoyach to everybody for joining together to make this so amazing. And shkoyach to Yaakov
Thank you.
for joining us all the way from London, England. Mirza Hashem, it should be the first of many things we do together.
Amen. Amen.
Shkoyach, shkoyach.
Amen.